Look at this Audi F1 concept car. It represents the exact goal of the 2026 Formula One regulations: to wipe the slate clean, level the grid, and convince new automotive giants that they actually have a chance to win. This illustrates the biggest technical restriction designed to force that parity. Regulators mandated a drop in the engine's geometric compression ratio, bringing the maximum limit down from 18:1 to 16:1. That mathematically caps the total horsepower and efficiency any manufacturer can squeeze out of their fuel. But during the winter buildup, a rumor began circulating the paddock. Mercedes and Red Bull had somehow engineered an extra 10 to 15 horsepower out of their new power units, despite this strict new cap. In a sport where pole position is decided by microscopic margins, that much raw power translates to an advantage of 3 to 4/10 of a second per lap. If these rumors were true, the FIA's attempt to level the playing field faced a massive technical threat before a single race had even started. Rival garages immediately demanded that the governing bodies step in and tear down the Mercedes and Red Bull power units. Yet, throughout the chaos, Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff looked completely unbothered. When the FIA completed their rigorous inspections, they delivered their verdict. Both the Mercedes and Red Bull engines measured exactly at the 16:1 limit. They were perfectly legal. This created a baffling engineering paradox. How can an engine behave like an 18:1 powerhouse on the track while flawlessly passing a 16:1 inspection in the garage? This advantage stems from a specific gap in how the FIA verifies the engines, specifically the environmental conditions of the test itself. To see where that gap exists, take a look at this cross-section of a standard engine cylinder. The compression ratio is simply the volume of space inside that cylinder when the piston is resting at the absolute bottom of its stroke, compared to the volume when it pushes to the very top. As we see here with the added thermometer and checkmark, the FIA physically measures that exact volume difference to ensure no team exceeds the 16:1 limit. But the rulebook contained a glaring blind spot. It explicitly stated that this measurement must be taken when the engine is static and sitting at ambient room temperature. On a race Sunday, an F1 engine is neither static nor room temperature. It operates at 12,000 RPM, enduring internal temperatures over 700 degrees Celsius. By strictly testing cold, dead metal, regulators ignored a basic law of thermodynamics. When you introduce extreme heat, materials physically change. Watch how this glowing piece of metal reacts. Under extreme heat, metal undergoes thermal expansion. It physically stretches and deforms outward. Formula One teams know this better than anyone. Recently, they stopped carving pistons out of solid steel blocks using traditional forging. Instead, they use a 3D printing process called laser powder bed fusion, building the pistons layer by microscopic layer. Notice the intricate lattice inside this piston cutaway. Because of 3D printing, engineers don't have to print a solid mass. They can hollow out the interior and weave complex internal channels to dictate exactly how thermal energy moves through the component. As the visual shows, when this specific lattice hits race temperatures, the channels force the heat to expand the piston vertically. The crown of the piston grows taller, reaching higher up into the cylinder. Now watch the connecting rod underneath. As it slams up and down thousands of times a minute, the immense G-forces actually stretch that titanium rod. Combined with the expanding piston, the gap at the top of the cylinder shrinks by a fraction of a millimeter, shifting our ratio from 16:1 closer to 18:1. That microscopic half-millimeter stretch is the entire loophole. Mercedes and Red Bull built a compliant 16:1 engine for the cold inspection bay, which legally shapeshifts into a dominant 18:1 engine the moment the rubber hits the asphalt. Legacy manufacturers like Ferrari and Honda suddenly realized they had completely missed the trick. They drafted a formal joint letter to the FIA, arguing that designing parts to intentionally shapeshift under heat violated the spirit of the geometric cap. The FIA faced an awkward reality. They couldn't write a rule banning the physical laws of thermal expansion. Their only option was to change how they measured the cars mid-season. This technical directive outlines their emergency patch. Starting June 1st, 2026, all engines must pass the 16:1 measurement in the cold and pass it again while heated to 130 degrees Celsius. By January 2027, the cold test will be thrown out entirely, permanently replaced by hot testing. The 2026 compression ratio controversy demonstrates that the most decisive gains often exist in the blank spaces of the rulebook, where material science and regulatory language intersect.